she wouldn't have wanted nothing to do with him.
Absolutely. And her wanton craving, her wanton lust, was constantly causing her to tempt Joseph. She desired him, but he was a godly young man who desired righteousness. Remember, Joseph was a young man. He was probably only, he was lucky to be out of his teens, probably. He wasn't homosexual. At least we see no indication of that. And obviously the temptation had to be great. But character and conviction would cause him to rise above the physical attraction. In other words, he would run away from youthful lusts. Now this righteous act would work against him and wouldn't be to his outward advantage. But he realized that to compromise his convictions would not be the answer. Timothy 2:20-22 tells us, "But in a great house there are only vessels of gold and silver." There are not only vessels of gold and silver, excuse me, but also of wood and clay, some for honor and some for dishonor. Therefore, if anyone cleanses himself from the latter, he will be a vessel for honor, sanctified and useful for the master, prepared for every good work. Flee also youthful lusts, but pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace, with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. In other words, ladies, pick up your skirts and run. Men, keep your belts buckled and run. Now, I know this next statement is probably going to shock all of you. A lot of good ministries and a lot of good ministers have been ruined.
Yep.
And lives have been torn up, have been scarred because of lack of character, lack of conviction, and falling prey to the seduction of sexual pleasure. The problem is the majority of them, it seems, are falling prey to the seductions of sexual pleasure of homosexuality.
Yeah, that's really weird.
Sexual desire is normal, and it's God-given, but it's supposed to be only in marriage. Now, if the one being tempted doesn't flee from these situations, the God-given appetites for sexual pleasure are going to be too much to avoid. It's almost like the alcoholic who cannot go to his old hangouts when he becomes saved because there's too much temptation there and he can't cope with it. So don't put yourself in a place of temptation. Set your mind on things above. Don't entertain lustful thoughts. So there are two kinds of adultery and fornication, by the way. The natural, which is sexual, and the spiritual, which bears the same consequence, defeat. To engage in adultery is to be illegitimately joined to the world. And James 4:4 explains it. It says, "Adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God." That's kind of scary when you listen to that statement. If you're going to be friends with the world, you're an enemy of God.
So what happened to Joseph then? When he didn't abide by that woman's advances? Does it say?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So we understand now that adultery with the world is an unlawful union that leads to defeat, right?
Yeah.
Genesis 39:19-20 says, "So it was when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, 'Your servant did to me after this manner.'" In other words, she
She
lied.
lied.
that his anger was aroused, Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined.
Prison.
And he was there
I knew
in
it
the
was
prison.
prison, I just couldn't remember when.
Now see, Joseph was not given a fair trial, was just thrown right into prison. He had been placed in a pit because of strife and insensitivity. But this time he was in prison because of righteousness. He sought to live by God's standards. But because of his godly character, Joseph faced the pit of false accusation. And that's a crisis that we all of us that make an impact in God's kingdom will face. Jesus, Peter, John, Paul, they all had to face it. And everybody that wants to rise to leadership of any kind will face it. False accusation is usually based on what?
Lies.
Lies, half-truths. There's never a fair trial in false
What he
accusations.
said.
The person's always judged privately without any witnesses to come to his defense.
Right.
They're only accusations and words of condemnation that attempt to destroy their reputation. Then a sentence of execution is called for. Hang him, shoot him, fry him, gas him, make him live. No, shut up. So it's very easy for the accused person to become defensive, to feebly try to justify, to vindicate,